considerable hiatus, so the return of the lecture. And this first one, with respect to absolute monarchies and absolutism in general, classic conservatism, we are going to look at Louis XIV. Now, I mentioned classic conservatism, and in the next section on the Enlightenment, we'll talk about classic liberalism. It's meant to be distinguished between modern liberals and conservatives. It's very different. A classic conservative was a royalist, and wanted to maintain the absolute power of monarchs, whereas a classic liberal wanted to decentralize power and have a liberal democracy, so to speak, or a republic, a representative democracy, representative system. All right, so when we refer to it, a classic conservative or a classic liberal, it's what we're looking at. So in looking at absolute rule and the reign of Louis XIV in France, it really boils down to four things, and that is the divine right of kings, his ability to effectively manipulate the people into believing that what he was doing was for their benefit. So as I mentioned in class, the classic give with the right and take with the left. His expansion of the military, as well as his control of the nobles. And so again, his reign boils down to divine right of kings, manipulation of the people, expanding military, and the control of the nobles. And so with respect to divine right of kings, the issuing of the Edict of Nantes, or Nantes, or depending on how you want to pronounce it, got rid of this idea of a degree of freedom of religion within France, and so basically said that, no, you Calvinist Huguenots, you need to leave. And the Calvinist Huguenots, they were wealthy individuals, and so it's symbolic in the sense of, okay, now you're going to be predominantly Catholic, but it's also symbolic in that the remaining nobles are going to feel a sense of fear with their loyalty. So we need to remain loyal to Louis XIV, otherwise, we might meet the same fate as the Huguenots. And so I want to make sure that that's completely clear. So the divine right of kings also ties in with this idea that the king, that Louis is God's chosen ruler. And so we can bring in elements of Catholicism and Protestantism or even Calvinism into this, in that the Catholics within France are used to having this hierarchy within or hierarchical order within the dogma, and the Calvinists are used to the idea of if God knows everything, then there is a plan, there is a plan, and there is a purpose, and that plan and purpose must include Louis being the king. And so it was useful. He was able to use it for both Calvinists and Catholics to buy into this idea of the divine right of kings. All right, and so that increases power if the people, if the citizens, if either the peasantry and the aristocracy are both believing that he is God's chosen king. With manipulation, the manipulation of the masses, we're dealing with things such as, like I said, the use of religion to justify divine right of kings, the use of fear as a tool to get the remaining aristocrats to buy into his idea and to buy into his vision and his control. And then also using symbols such as the palace at Versailles to illustrate his grandiose plan and power and authority over the rest of French society. So using manipulation in that sense. And then also the expansion of the military. But before we get into military, understand that within France there were three groups or estates: the clergy, the aristocracy, and the peasants. And only the peasants had to pay taxes. And so being a peasant was basically what you expect a peasant's life to be. But being in the military, it was a slightly better existence. And so to be a soldier was better than being a peasant. And so a peasant would go off and be a soldier. And so they would willingly expand the power of the military, of the French military, which effectively creates more power and centralizes power in Louis, since he ultimately controls the military. to us how the peasants are willingly adding into the power of Louis XIV. Okay, and with respect to the nobles, and the aristocracy, Louis XIV wanted to make sure that they were well paid, but also centralized in a location close to Versailles, close to Paris, because they used to kind of be scattered throughout the French countryside. And he knows that if they're all centered in a single location, they're much easier to control, because a noble or an aristocrat can be very dangerous based on their ability to hire mercenaries or soldiers for hire, to work for them to carry out their own particular agenda. And so if they're all in a central location, they're much easier to control, much easier to manipulate, much easier to get to follow through, but you also have to give them the illusion of you are there for their benefit. And so government jobs, serving Louis was very well paid, very well compensated. And as such, people, the nobles, the aristocrats knew that their fortunes and livelihood were tied to the throne, and so, as such, they dared not challenge that authority. So it's through all these reasons that Louis is able to maintain absolute power and control. All right. Now, our next study will be on what is going to happen in England with respect to absolute